Welcome to Fluent English Journey. Today's episode is specially created for advanced English learners at the C1 and C2 level who want to sound more natural, confident, and clear in real-life communication. In this session, we focus on daily English sentences that native speakers actually use in everyday situations. These are not textbook sentences. These are practical, real-life expressions that help you share ideas smoothly, manage conversations with ease, and explain your thoughts clearly without feeling stressed or rushed. Even if your grammar is already strong, choosing the right sentence at the right moment can completely change how natural you sound. As an advanced learner, your goal is not only to speak English correctly. Your real goal is to speak English comfortably and confidently. That means using sentences that feel calm, controlled, and natural. The sentences in today's episode are useful in many situations. You can use them at work, in meetings, during discussions, in casual conversations, or even when you need to think out loud. As you listen, pay close attention to the sentence structure and imagine yourself using these expressions in your own daily life. Let us begin with sentences that help you slow down and organize your thoughts. Native speakers often prepare the listener before sharing an idea. This makes the conversation easier to follow and shows confidence. For example, you can say, "Let me explain this in a simple way so it's clear." Another helpful sentence is, "I want to take a step back and look at the bigger picture." These expressions give you time to think and help you sound thoughtful instead of rushed. Sometimes people may misunderstand your point. Instead of repeating yourself nervously, you can calmly clarify your meaning. You might say, "That's not exactly what I meant, so let me rephrase it." You can also say, "What I'm trying to say is a bit more specific than that." These sentences help you stay in control of the conversation while keeping a calm tone. Now, let's look at sentences you can use when you agree with someone but want to add your own idea. A strong and natural sentence is, "I agree with your point, and I would also add that this depends on the situation." Another common expression is, "I see what you mean, and from my experience, this works best when people communicate clearly." These sentences show both respect and confidence at the same time. There are also moments when you need to politely disagree, especially in professional or serious conversations. Instead of sounding emotional or aggressive, you can say, "I understand your perspective, but I see it a little differently." You can also say, "I respect your opinion, but based on what I've seen, the outcome can change." These sentences help you sound mature, balanced, and professional. Daily English also includes sentences for thinking out loud, which native speakers do very often. For example, you might say, "I'm still figuring this out, but my first thought is this." Another useful sentence is, "I haven't fully decided yet, but I'm leaning toward this option." These expressions sound honest and natural, not weak or uncertain. In longer conversations, you often need to move smoothly from one idea to another. A helpful transition sentence is, "That brings me to the next point I want to talk about." You can also say, "With that in mind, let's look at this from another angle." These transitions make your speech flow naturally and clearly. When you want to emphasize an important idea, simple sentences work best. You can say, "The most important thing to remember here is this." Another strong option is, "What really matters in this situation is how people respond." These sentences guide the listener and help them focus on your main message. Now let's move into daily sentences that help you sound calm and confident during longer conversations. At an advanced level, confidence does not come from using difficult words. It comes from clarity. Clear sentences make people trust what you say. One useful sentence is, "I feel confident about this decision because I've thought it through carefully." Another helpful expression is, "I'm comfortable with this approach, even though it may take more time." These sentences sound balanced, realistic, and confident. In everyday life, you often need to explain your reasons for doing something. Instead of sounding defensive, you can speak calmly and directly. You might say, "The main reason I chose this option is because it offers better long-term results." You can also say, "I made this decision after considering several factors carefully." These sentences show maturity and thoughtful decision-making. Let's now look at sentences you can use when you need more time to respond. Advanced speakers do not rush their answers. They pause politely. A natural sentence is, "That's a good question, and I'd like a moment to think about it." Another option is, "Let me take a second to organize my thoughts before I answer." These expressions sound professional and relaxed. Sometimes you may want to correct yourself while speaking, which is very normal. You can say, "Let me correct that because I want to be precise." You can also say, "I should clarify that point to avoid confusion." These sentences help you stay accurate without losing confidence. Daily English also includes sentences for sharing opinions respectfully. You can say, "In my opinion, this approach works better in most situations." Another natural sentence is, "From my point of view, communication plays the biggest role here." These expressions are simple, powerful, and commonly used by fluent speakers. Finally, these sentences are not only useful for work or formal meetings. You can also use them in discussions with friends, classmates, and in everyday conversations. The more you practice them, the more natural and confident your English will become. At times, you may want to join a conversation smoothly without interrupting or sounding abrupt. In these moments, you can say, "I'd like to build on what was just said." Another natural option is, "That's an interesting point, and it connects to something I noticed." These sentences help you enter conversations confidently and naturally. There are also situations where you need to explain a complex idea in a simple way. Advanced speakers do this very well because clarity is more important than complexity. You can say, "I'll explain this in a simple way so it's easier to understand." Another helpful sentence is, "At its core, this idea is actually quite straightforward." These expressions show clarity, confidence, and control. Now let's move on to sentences for everyday problem solving. When something goes wrong, your tone matters just as much as your words. Instead of sounding stressed, you can say, "There seems to be a small issue, but I believe we can fix it." You can also say, "This isn't ideal, but it's manageable." These sentences help keep conversations calm, professional, and productive. In daily conversations, you often need to set boundaries politely, which is an important advanced skill. You can say, "I understand the request, but I'm not able to commit to that right now." Another clear and polite sentence is, "I'd prefer to handle this at a later time." These expressions are respectful, firm, and confident. Now let's talk about sentences for expressing uncertainty in a confident way. Being unsure does not mean being weak. You can say, "I'm not completely certain, but based on what I know, this seems likely." You can also say, "There are still a few unknowns, but this is my current understanding." These sentences sound thoughtful, honest, and intelligent. Daily English also includes sentences for showing appreciation, which are simple but powerful. You can say, "I really appreciate the effort you put into this." Another useful sentence is, "Thank you for taking the time to explain this clearly." These expressions help build trust and strong relationships. Sometimes you may want to politely end a topic and move forward. Advanced speakers do this smoothly. You can say, "I think we've covered this topic well, so we can move on." Another option is, "That addresses my main concern, so we can continue." These sentences help conversations flow naturally. Now let's look at sentences you can use when telling a short story or sharing an experience. You can begin with, "Something interesting happened to me recently." Another natural opening is, "I had an experience that made me think differently." These openings invite attention without sounding dramatic. As you continue the story, you can guide the listener. You might say, "At first, I didn't think it was important. Or, over time, I realized the situation was more serious than I expected. These sentences give your story structure and clarity. When you finish explaining a situation, you can reflect on it thoughtfully. You can say, looking back, I learned something valuable from that experience. Another good sentence is, that situation taught me the importance of being prepared. These reflections sound mature and meaningful. Let's now move into sentences for expressing emotions in a balanced way. Advanced English does not mean hiding emotions. It means expressing them clearly and calmly. You can say, I felt frustrated at first, but I stayed focused. You can also say, I was genuinely surprised by how things turned out. These sentences are honest, controlled, and natural. Daily conversations often include giving advice, and you can do this gently. You might say, if I were in your position, I'd consider this option. Another helpful sentence is, one thing that might help is taking a step back. These expressions sound supportive, not commanding. Now let's focus on sentences for summarizing ideas, which is an advanced communication skill. You can say, to summarize, the main issue is communication. You can also say, in short, this comes down to consistency and effort. These sentences help listeners clearly understand your main point. In longer conversations, it's also helpful to check understanding. You can say, does that explanation make sense to you? Or, let me know if you'd like me to explain that differently. These sentences show awareness, respect, and professionalism. There are times when you want to sound neutral and objective, especially in serious discussions. You can say, based on the information available, this seems reasonable. Another useful sentence is, from an objective point of view, both options have advantages. These expressions reduce emotion and increase clarity. Now let's move into sentences for daily reflection and thinking aloud. Many fluent speakers talk this way naturally. You can say, I've been thinking about this a lot lately. You can also say, this situation made me reconsider my priorities. These sentences sound thoughtful and natural. When you want to express growth or change, you can say, I've learned to handle situations like this more calmly. Another strong sentence is, over time, my perspective on this has changed. These expressions show development and maturity. Daily English also includes sentences for encouragement. You can say, you're making progress, even if it doesn't feel like it. You can also say, small steps still move you forward. These sentences are simple, positive, and motivating. Finally, when discussing plans, you can speak calmly and clearly. You can say, my plan is to focus on this step by step. This kind of sentence shows intention, patience, and confidence. Another natural sentence you can use is, I'm keeping my expectations realistic for now. This kind of sentence sounds grounded and emotionally balanced. When plans change, advanced speakers respond calmly instead of reacting emotionally. You can say, plans have changed slightly, but the goal remains the same. Another useful sentence is, we need to adjust our approach based on new information. These expressions show flexibility and maturity in daily conversations. Silence can happen in conversations, and fluent speakers handle it comfortably. Instead of feeling awkward, you can say, I'm just thinking for a moment. You can also say, give me a second to reflect on that. These sentences keep the conversation relaxed and natural. Now let's focus on sentences for explaining habits and routines. You can say, I try to keep a consistent routine during the week. Another natural sentence is, I usually take some time each day to reflect. These expressions sound clear, natural, and confident. When talking about challenges, you can stay balanced and calm. You might say, this has been challenging, but it's also been a learning experience. Another helpful sentence is, I'm still working through this one step at a time. These sentences show resilience and emotional control. Daily English also includes sentences for expressing hope. You can say, I'm hopeful that things will improve with time. You can also say, I believe this effort will lead to positive results. These sentences sound calm, realistic, and optimistic. As we continue, remember that the goal is not to memorize sentences. The goal is to feel comfortable and in control when you speak. As you listen, imagine yourself using these sentences naturally in your own conversations. Now let's focus on sentences you can use when you want to sound polite but direct. Many learners struggle with this balance. Clear and balanced sentences help you communicate without creating tension. You can say, I want to be clear about my expectations so there's no confusion. Another strong sentence is, I believe honesty is important, so I want to share my thoughts openly. These expressions sound respectful, confident, and mature. In daily life, you often need to respond to suggestions. When you agree, you can say, that sounds reasonable, and I'm comfortable with that plan. Another option is, I think that approach makes sense given the situation. These sentences show cooperation and openness. When you don't fully agree, you can still stay calm and polite. You might say, I see the value in that idea, but I have some concerns. Another natural sentence is, I'm not fully convinced yet, but I'm open to discussing it. These expressions keep conversations constructive and professional. Now let's look at sentences for expressing priorities. Clear priorities help others understand you better. You can say, my main priority right now is staying focused and consistent. You can also say, what matters most to me in this situation is clarity. These sentences sound grounded and thoughtful. Daily English also includes sentences for explaining limits. Advanced speakers know how to say no politely. You can say, I'd like to help, but I don't have the capacity right now. Another useful sentence is, I need to be realistic about what I can manage at the moment. These expressions protect your boundaries without sounding rude. Let's move on to sentences for explaining progress, whether at work or in personal life. You can say, I'm making steady progress, even if it feels slow. Another helpful sentence is, things are moving in the right direction, step by step. These expressions sound honest, positive, and realistic. Sometimes you need to explain a delay. Instead of apologizing too much, you can stay calm and professional. You can say, there's been a slight delay, but I'm addressing it. Another sentence is, this took longer than expected, but the quality is important. These sentences show responsibility and confidence. Now let's talk about sentences for daily reflection. Fluent speakers often reflect out loud. You can say, I've been reflecting on how I handle challenges. Another thoughtful sentence is, this experience made me think more deeply about my choices. These expressions sound natural and mature. Daily conversations also include reassurance. You can reassure others calmly by saying, there's no need to worry. Everything is under control. Another useful sentence is, we're aware of the issue, and we're working on it. These sentences create trust and calm. Now let's focus on sentences for explaining mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes, and advanced speakers take responsibility clearly. You can say, I made an error and I take full responsibility for it. You can also say, I recognize what went wrong and I'm learning from it. These expressions show maturity and accountability. Finally, when you want to suggest improvement, you can do it gently. You might say, one way to improve this might be to simplify the process. Another helpful sentence is, we could consider a different approach to make this more effective. These sentences sound constructive, respectful, and confident. These sentences sound collaborative and supportive. Now let's move into sentences for daily encouragement and motivation. These are useful not only for others, but also for yourself. You can say, consistency matters more than perfection. Another simple but powerful sentence is, every small effort adds up over time. These expressions are easy to use, yet very effective. In conversations, you often need to confirm information to avoid confusion. You can say, just to confirm, this is what we agreed on. Another helpful sentence is, let me make sure I understand this correctly. These sentences prevent misunderstandings and show responsibility. Now, let's continue with sentences for explaining preferences. You can say, I tend to prefer simple solutions over complicated ones. Another natural sentence is, I usually work best when I have a clear structure. These expressions help others understand how you think and work. When talking about energy or focus, you can sound natural and honest. You might say, I'm more focused in the morning than in the evening. You can also say, I need a short break to recharge my energy. These sentences are very common in daily English. Daily English also includes sentences for expressing patience. You can say, I understand that this takes time, and I'm patient. Another balanced sentence is, I'm willing to wait if it leads to better results. These expressions sound calm, mature, and confident. Now let's talk about sentences for giving feedback. Good feedback is clear, respectful, and balanced. You can say, overall, this is well done, and there are a few areas to improve. Another polite sentence is, I appreciate the effort, and I have some suggestions. These expressions keep feedback constructive. When receiving feedback, you can respond positively. You might say, thank you for the feedback. I'll take it seriously. Another good response is, I appreciate your honesty, and I'll work on that. These sentences show openness and professionalism. Let's move on to sentences for explaining routines and discipline. You can say, I try to stay disciplined even when motivation is low. Another practical sentence is, having a routine helps me stay consistent. These expressions sound realistic and grounded. Daily conversations also include expressing tiredness or stress without sounding negative. You can say, I'm feeling a bit tired, but I'm managing. Another calm sentence is, it's been a demanding day, but I'm handling it. These expressions sound controlled and balanced. Now let's focus on sentences for learning and personal growth. You can say, I'm constantly learning from my experiences. Another reflective sentence is, each challenge helps me grow in a different way. These expressions sound thoughtful and mature. When you want to shift topics smoothly, you can say, on a related note, I'd like to mention something else. Another natural option is, that reminds me of another important point. These sentences help conversations flow naturally. Let's continue with sentences for expressing trust. You can say, I trust the process and the effort we're putting in. Another reassuring sentence is, I have confidence in how this is being handled. These expressions help create calm and trust. Daily English also includes sentences for explaining balance. You can say, I'm trying to find a balance between effort and rest. Another common sentence is, balance is important to avoid burnout. These expressions are natural and widely used. When discussing results, you can stay realistic. You might say, the results aren't perfect, but they're encouraging. Another mature sentence is, there's room for improvement, and that's acceptable. These expressions show emotional stability and perspective. Now let's talk again about explaining decisions, but in a softer and calmer way. You can say, after some thought, this felt like the right choice. Another thoughtful sentence is, I weighed the options carefully before deciding. These expressions sound reflective and confident. Let's move into sentences for clear daily communication. You can say, I want to make sure my message is clear. Another useful sentence is, please let me know if anything is unclear. These expressions show awareness and respect. In longer conversations, you may want to restate your point. You can say, to put it another way, this is the main idea. Another helpful sentence is, what I want to emphasize is this. These sentences guide the listener. Daily English also includes sentences for calm confidence. You can say, I'm comfortable with where I am right now. Another steady sentence is, I trust my ability to handle this situation. These expressions sound balanced and self-assured. Let's continue with sentences for acknowledging effort. You can say, I recognize the effort you've put into this. Another respectful sentence is, your dedication doesn't go unnoticed. These expressions build trust and mutual respect. Finally, when talking about the future, you can stay grounded and realistic. You might say, I'm looking ahead with cautious optimism. Another strong sentence is, I'm focused on steady progress rather than quick results. These sentences sound wise and thoughtful. Now let's focus on sentences you can use when you want to explain your thinking process. Many advanced speakers make their thinking visible, and this helps others follow their ideas more easily. You can say, I'm approaching this step by step so nothing important is missed. Another useful sentence is, my thinking is based on what I've observed over time. These expressions show logic, awareness, and clarity. In daily conversations, you often need to slow things down. Even when there is pressure to respond quickly, calm speakers control the pace. You can say, let's slow this down and look at it carefully. Another natural sentence is, there's no rush, so we can take our time with this. These sentences create space, confidence, and calm. Now let's move on to sentences you can use to acknowledge difficulty without sounding negative. You can say, this isn't easy, but it's manageable with effort. Another strong sentence is, there are challenges here, but they're not impossible to handle. These expressions sound realistic and resilient. Daily English also includes sentences for expressing responsibility. You can say, I'm responsible for this, and I take that seriously. Another clear sentence is, I understand my role in this situation. These sentences build trust and credibility. When you want to explain effort, you can be calm and direct. You might say, I'm putting consistent effort into improving this. Another reliable sentence is, I'm committed to doing this properly. These expressions sound steady and dependable. Now let's talk about sentences you can use to explain your values. Values often appear in serious or meaningful conversations. You can say, I value clear communication and mutual respect. Another sincere sentence is, integrity matters a lot to me in situations like this. These expressions sound grounded and authentic. Daily conversations also include moments of pause and reflection. You can say, I need a moment to reflect on what was just said. Another thoughtful sentence is, I want to think this through carefully before responding. These expressions show maturity and thoughtfulness. Let's move into sentences for explaining changes in perspective. Growth often involves seeing things differently over time. You can say, my perspective on this has evolved over time. Another natural sentence is, I see this differently now than I did before. These expressions sound mature and reflective. In daily life, you often need to reassure yourself and others. You can say, I trust that this will work out with patience. Another calming sentence is, I believe we're moving in the right direction. These expressions create reassurance and stability. Now let's focus on sentences you can use when listening actively, which is an important advanced skill. You can say, I hear what you're saying, and I understand your concern. Another respectful sentence is, I'm listening carefully and taking this seriously. These expressions show empathy and respect. When conversations become emotional, calm language helps reduce tension. You can say, I want to keep this conversation respectful and constructive. Another helpful sentence is, let's focus on understanding each other. These expressions help maintain balance and clarity. Daily English also includes sentences for explaining thinking habits. You can say, I tend to think things through before acting. Another reflective sentence is, I usually consider different angles before deciding. These expressions sound thoughtful and self-aware. Now, let's move into sentences for describing effort over time. You can say, this took time and persistence to develop. Another motivating sentence is, progress came from consistent small actions. These expressions sound realistic and encouraging. When you want to express acceptance, you can do so calmly. You can say, I've accepted that not everything is under my control. Another wise sentence is, I'm learning to be comfortable with uncertainty. These expressions sound balanced and mature. Daily conversations also include moments of appreciation for learning. You can say, this experience taught me valuable lessons. Another positive sentence is, I'm grateful for what I learned through this process. These expressions show growth and gratitude. Now let's focus on sentences for managing expectations. Clear expectations reduce frustration. You can say, I want to set realistic expectations from the beginning. Another practical sentence is, it's important to be clear about what's possible. These expressions sound responsible and grounded. When explaining patience, you can say, good results often take time. Another study sentence is, I'm willing to wait for meaningful progress. These expressions sound calm and confident. Daily English also includes sentences for managing emotions. You can say, I'm managing my emotions and staying focused. Another self-aware sentence is, I'm choosing to respond calmly. These expressions show emotional intelligence. Now let's move into sentences for explaining effort without seeking praise. You can say, I'm doing my best to handle this responsibly. Another humble sentence is, I'm focused on doing the work properly. These expressions sound modest and strong. When you want to acknowledge uncertainty again, you can say, there are still things I don't fully understand. Another honest sentence is, I'm open to learning more about this. These expressions show humility and openness. Daily conversations also include planning and adjustment. You can say, I'll adjust my approach if needed. Another flexible sentence is, I'm staying flexible as the situation develops. These expressions show adaptability. These sentences are very common in natural speech. When you want to express focus, you can say, I'm fully focused on what needs to be done. Another useful sentence is, I'm minimizing distractions to stay productive. These expressions sound clear and intentional. Daily English also includes sentences for quiet confidence. You can say, I trust my preparation. Another study sentence is, I feel calm and prepared. These sentences sound strong without being loud. Now let's move into sentences for reflection at the end of a day or experience without fully closing the conversation. You can say, I like to reflect on what went well and what can improve. Another thoughtful sentence is, taking time to reflect helps me grow. These expressions sound balanced and mature. Now let's focus on sentences you can use when explaining effort and discipline in everyday life. Many people talk about motivation, but fluent speakers often talk about consistency instead. You can say, I focus on showing up every day, even when motivation is low. Another practical sentence is, discipline helps me stay consistent when things become difficult. These expressions sound honest and realistic. In daily conversations, you may want to explain how you deal with pressure. Instead of sounding stressed, you can speak calmly. You can say, I try to stay calm under pressure and focus on what I can control. Another balanced sentence is, pressure helps me stay focused when I handle it properly. These expressions show emotional control. Now, let's move on to sentences you can use when discussing responsibility in a team or group. You can say, everyone has a role, and I take mine seriously. Another reliable sentence is, I focus on doing my part well so the whole process runs smoothly. These expressions sound cooperative and dependable. Daily English also includes sentences for explaining effort that isn't always visible. You can say, a lot of the work happens behind the scenes. Another reflective sentence is, progress is often quiet before it becomes visible. These expressions sound thoughtful and realistic. Now let's look at sentences for explaining learning habits. You can say, I learn best when I practice regularly rather than occasionally. Another natural sentence is, I prefer study learning instead of rushing through material. These expressions are very common among fluent speakers. When talking about improvement, it helps to stay grounded. You can say, I'm improving gradually, and that's enough for me. Another mature sentence is, I measure progress by consistency, not speed. These expressions sound confident and balanced. Daily conversations often include moments where you need to explain why you're careful. You can say, I prefer to be careful rather than rush into decisions. Another thoughtful sentence is, taking time now prevents problems later. These expressions show foresight and responsibility. Now let's move into sentences for explaining focus and attention. You can say, I try to give my full attention to one task at a time. Another simple sentence is, staying focused helps me work more effectively. These expressions are natural and widely used. In daily life, you may need to explain why you choose simplicity. You can say, I prefer simple solutions because they're easier to maintain. Another wise sentence is, keeping things simple reduces unnecessary stress. These expressions sound practical and thoughtful. Let's continue with sentences for describing routines that support growth. You can say, I follow a routine that supports my long-term goals. Another reflective sentence is, daily habits shape long-term results. These expressions are common in thoughtful conversations. Daily English also includes sentences for calm determination. You can say, I'm determined to continue, even when progress feels slow. Another study sentence is, I stay committed to the process. These expressions sound strong without being aggressive. Now let's focus on sentences you can use when explaining how you deal with setbacks. You can say, setbacks are part of the process and I learn from them. Another balanced sentence is, I try to respond to setbacks with patience. These expressions show resilience. When you want to acknowledge difficulty without complaining, you can say, this requires effort, but it's worth it. Another positive sentence is, challenges help me grow stronger over time. These expressions sound healthy and realistic. Daily conversations also include sentences for self-trust. You can say, I trust myself to handle what comes next. Another confident sentence is, I believe in my ability to adapt. These expressions quietly build confidence. Now let's move into sentences for explaining communication preferences. You can say, I appreciate clear and direct communication. Another helpful sentence is, I prefer open conversations where expectations are clear. These expressions help others understand you better. When misunderstandings happen, you can stay calm and constructive. You can say, there seems to be a misunderstanding, so let's clarify it. Another useful sentence is, I want to make sure we're on the same page. These expressions keep conversations smooth. Daily English also includes sentences for emotional balance. You can say, I try not to react emotionally in the moment. Another mature sentence is, taking a pause helps me respond thoughtfully. These expressions show self-control. In daily life, you may want to explain why you value rest. You can say, rest helps me stay productive in the long run. Another natural sentence is, taking breaks allows me to recharge mentally. These sentences are widely used and sound balanced. Daily conversations also include sentences for explaining balance between work and life. You can say, I try to balance productivity with rest. Another realistic sentence is, balance helps me stay consistent without burnout. These expressions sound practical and honest. Now let's move into sentences for expressing calm optimism. You can say, I'm optimistic while staying realistic. Another grounded sentence is, I believe progress will come with time and effort. These expressions avoid exaggeration and sound mature. When discussing outcomes, you can stay measured. You can say, the outcome may not be perfect, but it's meaningful. Another fluent sentence is, I focus on progress rather than perfection. These expressions are very common in natural speech. Daily English also includes sentences for explaining patience with others. You can say, everyone moves at a different pace, and I respect that. Another kind sentence is, patience helps maintain good relationships. These expressions sound thoughtful and emotionally aware. Now let's focus on sentences you can use when acknowledging effort from others. You can say, I appreciate the consistency you bring to this. Another supportive sentence is, your effort makes a real difference. These expressions help build positive connections. In conversations, you may also need to express that you are still learning. You can say, I'm still learning and I'm open to improvement. Another humble sentence is, growth comes from staying open-minded. These expressions sound confident without arrogance. Daily English includes sentences for explaining thoughtful decision-making. You can say, I consider long-term impact before making decisions. Another responsible sentence is, I prefer decisions that support stability. These expressions show maturity and care. Now, let's move into sentences for explaining how you stay grounded. You can say, I try to stay grounded by focusing on what truly matters. Another reflective sentence is, perspective helps me stay calm. These expressions sound thoughtful and steady. When you want to express acceptance without stress, you can say, I do what I can and accept the rest. Another peaceful sentence is, letting go of control helps reduce pressure. These expressions sound calm and emotionally balanced. Daily conversations also include sentences for steady confidence. You can say, I feel steady in my approach. Another quiet but powerful sentence is, I trust the process I'm following. These expressions communicate confidence without force. Now, let's continue with sentences for daily reflection that don't close the episode. You can say, each day gives me something new to learn. Another reflective sentence is, reflection helps me improve one step at a time. These expressions keep the flow open and ongoing. As you listen, remember that these sentences are tools. You can adapt them to your own voice and your own situations. Now let's focus on sentences you can use when explaining your mindset. Mindset often appears in conversations about work, learning, and personal growth. You can say, I try to approach situations with a calm and open mindset. Another balanced sentence is, my mindset helps me stay focused even when things feel uncertain. These expressions sound thoughtful and controlled. In daily life, you may need to explain why you stay consistent without immediate results. You can say, I stay consistent because results take time to appear. Another patient sentence is, I believe consistency creates long-term improvement. These expressions show maturity and self-trust. Now, let's move on to sentences for expressing clarity about direction. You can say, I'm clear about where I'm heading right now. Another confident sentence is, I know what I want to focus on at this stage. These expressions sound clear without being rigid. Daily English also includes sentences for explaining how you deal with distractions. You can say, I try to limit distractions so I can stay focused. Another common sentence is, reducing distractions helps me think more clearly. These expressions are simple and widely used. These sentences sound respectful and honest in real conversations. Sometimes, you may need to explain why you choose patience over speed. You can say, I prefer to move carefully rather than rush and make mistakes. Another responsible sentence is, taking time allows me to do things properly. These expressions show care and reliability. Daily English also includes sentences for explaining trust in others. You can say, I trust people when communication is clear. Another meaningful sentence is, trust grows when actions match words. These sentences are simple, but they carry weight. Now let's focus on sentences you can use when you want to express accountability. You can say, I hold myself accountable for my actions. Another strong sentence is, I believe accountability leads to growth. These expressions sound mature and dependable. When you want to explain why you stay calm in difficult conversations, you can say, staying calm helps me listen more effectively. Another emotionally intelligent sentence is, a calm response keeps the conversation productive. These expressions show self-control and awareness. Daily conversations often include sentences for expressing values, especially honesty. You can say, honesty helps build strong relationships. Another sincere sentence is, I value honest conversations, even when they are difficult. These expressions sound grounded and genuine. Now let's move into sentences for explaining effort in communication. You can say, I try to communicate clearly to avoid confusion. Another practical sentence is, clear communication saves time and energy. These expressions are common in professional and personal settings. In daily life, you may want to explain why you reflect regularly. You can say, reflection helps me understand my actions better. Another thoughtful sentence is, I reflect regularly to improve my decisions. These expressions sound calm and self-aware. Daily English also includes sentences for handling uncertainty. You can say, I accept uncertainty and focus on what I can do. Another realistic sentence is, uncertainty is part of growth. These expressions show emotional balance. Now let's focus on sentences for explaining progress without comparison. You can say, I focus on my own progress rather than comparing myself to others. Another confident sentence is, everyone grows at a different pace. These expressions are often used by emotionally mature speakers. When talking about challenges, you can say, challenges push me to improve. Another reflective sentence is, difficult moments often teach valuable lessons. These expressions sound thoughtful and strong. Daily conversations also include sentences for explaining self-awareness. You can say, I'm aware of my strengths and my limitations. Another mature sentence is, self-awareness helps me improve steadily. These expressions show balance and honesty. Now, let's move into sentences for calm confidence. You can say, I feel confident without needing to prove anything. Another subtle but powerful sentence is, quiet confidence comes from preparation. These expressions are steady and composed. In conversations, you may want to show that you are open to feedback. You can say, I'm open to feedback and willing to improve. Another professional sentence is, feedback helps me grow when it's constructive. These expressions build trust. Daily English includes sentences for emotional balance. You can say, I try to respond thoughtfully rather than react emotionally. Another controlled sentence is, managing emotions helps me communicate better. These expressions show maturity. Now let's focus on sentences for explaining effort in learning English. You can say, I practice English daily to stay comfortable with the language. Another useful sentence is, regular exposure helps me maintain fluency. These expressions are especially relevant for learners. When you want to explain why repetition matters, you can say, repetition helps make the language feel natural. Another accurate sentence is, daily practice builds confidence over time. These expressions are simple and effective. Daily conversations also include sentences for explaining listening skills. You can say, I focus on listening carefully before responding. Another wise sentence is, good listening improves communication. These sentences are straightforward and effective. In daily life, you may want to explain why you value simplicity in language. You can say, simple language helps ideas land clearly. Another clear sentence is, clarity matters more than complexity. These expressions are especially important for advanced speakers. Daily English also includes sentences for explaining study effort. You can say, I show up consistently, even on quiet days. Another discipline sentence is, steady effort creates reliable results. These expressions sound grounded and dependable. Now let us focus on sentences for calm optimism. You can say, I remain hopeful while staying grounded. Another balanced sentence is, optimism helps me move forward. These expressions avoid exaggeration and sound realistic. When discussing long-term goals without pressure, you can say, I focus on long-term growth rather than quick wins. Another intentional sentence is, long-term goals guide my daily actions. These expressions show direction without stress. Daily conversations also include sentences for patience with yourself. You can say, I am patient with myself as I learn. Another kind sentence is, self-patience supports progress. These expressions sound healthy and realistic. Now let us move into sentences for managing stress. You can say, I manage stress by staying organized. Another practical sentence is, structure helps reduce unnecessary stress. These expressions are common in calm conversations. You may also want to explain your communication style. You can say, I prefer direct but respectful communication. Another helpful sentence is, clear expectations help me work better with others. These expressions set boundaries naturally. Daily English includes sentences for trusting the process. You can say, I trust the process, even when results are slow. Another calm sentence is, patience allows progress to unfold naturally. These expressions sound steady and confident. Now let us continue with sentences for daily reflection without closing the episode. You can say, each conversation teaches me something new. Another open-ended sentence is, every day offers a chance to improve communication. These expressions keep the flow moving forward. Now let us focus on sentences for handling responsibility over time. You can say, I take responsibility for staying consistent, even when no one is watching. Another reliable sentence is, being responsible means following through, not just starting. These expressions sound thoughtful and mature. In daily life, you may want to explain why you value preparation. You can say, preparation helps me stay calm and focused. Another strong sentence is, when I prepare properly, I communicate more clearly. These expressions are simple and powerful. Now let us move into sentences for quiet effort. You can say, most progress happens quietly through daily effort. Another reflective sentence is, small actions repeated daily create meaningful change. These expressions sound wise and realistic. Daily English also includes sentences for handling pressure without drama. You can say, I focus on what I can control when pressure increases. Another calm sentence is, pressure becomes manageable when I stay organized. These expressions show emotional control. Now let us look at sentences for discipline in personal terms. You can say, discipline helps me move forward when motivation fades. Another honest sentence is, I rely on habits rather than emotions to stay consistent. These expressions sound mature and grounded. In conversations, you may want to explain why you value clarity. You can say, clarity helps avoid unnecessary misunderstandings. Another widely used sentence is, clear expectations make communication easier for everyone. These expressions support smooth interaction. Daily English also includes sentences for responding to mistakes calmly. You can say, I acknowledge mistakes and focus on correcting them. Another resilient sentence is, mistakes are opportunities to improve, not reasons to stop. These expressions show strength without defensiveness. Now let us focus on sentences for learning from experience. You can say, experience has taught me to be more patient. Another reflective sentence is, I learn more from experience than from theory alone. These expressions sound natural and sincere. In daily conversations, you may want to explain why you prefer steady improvement. You can say, I focus on steady improvement rather than quick results. Another encouraging sentence is, slow progress is still meaningful progress. These expressions are realistic and motivating. Daily English includes sentences for managing energy. You can say, I manage my energy carefully to stay consistent. Another practical sentence is, rest helps me maintain focus and clarity. These expressions support balance. Now let us move into sentences for calm confidence in social situations. You can say, I feel comfortable being myself in conversations. Another grounded sentence is, I don't feel the need to impress others. These expressions sound secure and relaxed. Daily conversations also include sentences for expressing emotional awareness. Being aware of emotions helps communication feel calmer and more respectful. You can say, I am aware of how emotions affect communication. Another thoughtful sentence is, recognizing emotions helps me respond calmly. These expressions sound wise and emotionally mature. Now let us focus on sentences for explaining patience in conversations. Not every conversation needs to be rushed. You can say, I give conversations time to unfold naturally. Another calm sentence is, patience helps maintain respectful dialogue. These expressions reduce tension and create understanding. Daily English also includes sentences for staying focused during long tasks. You can say, I break tasks into smaller steps to stay focused. Another practical sentence is, clear steps help me maintain momentum. These expressions are very common in everyday speech. Now let us move into sentences for staying grounded during uncertainty. You can say, I stay grounded by focusing on the present moment. Another calming sentence is, staying present helps reduce unnecessary worry. These expressions sound steady and peaceful. In daily life, you may want to explain why you value honesty with yourself. You can say, I try to be honest with myself about my limits. Another reflective sentence is, self-honesty helps me make better decisions. These expressions show self-awareness. Daily conversations also include sentences for long-term thinking. You can say, I consider long-term impact before acting. Another thoughtful sentence is, thinking long-term helps guide my daily choices. These expressions sound mature and responsible. Now let us focus on sentences for balancing effort and acceptance. You can say, I put in effort while accepting what I cannot control. Another calming sentence is, balance helps me avoid unnecessary stress. These expressions are useful when talking about growth. When discussing improvement, you can say, I focus on improving one thing at a time. Another natural sentence is, small improvements create lasting change. These expressions feel realistic and encouraging. Daily English also includes sentences for calm reactions to feedback. You can say, I listen to feedback carefully before responding. Another mature sentence is, feedback helps me see things more clearly. These expressions show openness and growth. Now let us move into sentences for handling disagreement respectfully. You can say, I express disagreement calmly and respectfully. Another balanced sentence is, respectful disagreement keeps conversations healthy. These expressions help maintain good relationships. In daily conversations, you may want to explain why you value understanding over winning. You can say, understanding matters more to me than being right. Another advanced sentence is, I focus on clarity rather than argument. These expressions sound thoughtful and confident. Daily English also includes sentences for managing expectations of yourself. You can say, I set realistic expectations for my progress. Another supportive sentence is, realistic expectations help me stay motivated. These expressions reduce pressure. Now let us focus on sentences for calm optimism in daily life. You can say, I stay hopeful while staying realistic. Another steady sentence is, hope helps me move forward steadily. These expressions are balanced and natural. In conversations, you may want to explain why you value consistency in relationships. You can say, consistency builds trust over time. Another meaningful sentence is, reliable actions strengthen relationships. These expressions are widely used. Daily English includes sentences for managing time thoughtfully. You can say, I manage my time carefully to avoid rushing. Another practical sentence is, planning helps me use my time wisely. These expressions sound organized and calm. Now let us move into sentences for calm self-confidence. You can say, I trust my preparation and experience. Another study sentence is, confidence comes from knowing I am prepared. These expressions sound quiet and strong. You may also want to explain why you value reflection at the end of the day. You can say, reflection helps me understand what went well. Another thoughtful sentence is, looking back helps me improve tomorrow. These expressions keep growth continuous. Daily conversations also include sentences for staying open-minded. You can say, I stay open-minded to different perspectives. Another growth-focused sentence is, openness helps me learn from others. These expressions show maturity. Now let us gently move into sentences for calm acceptance, where you acknowledge reality without stress and continue forward with clarity and balance. You can say, I accept situations as they are and respond thoughtfully. Another calm sentence is, acceptance helps me move forward without resistance. These sentences sound peaceful and grounded. You have just spent time listening to daily English sentences designed to help you speak with clarity, confidence, and control at an advanced level. These sentences are not meant to sound impressive or complicated. They're meant to sound real. This is the kind of English people use when they think clearly, speak calmly, and express themselves honestly in everyday life. There is no pressure in this kind of language. There is balance, intention, and awareness. Remember, progress at the C1 and C2 level does not come from learning more difficult words. It comes from using simple language with better timing, better tone, and better purpose. When you practice sentences like these, you train your mind to think in English naturally. Over time, your speech becomes smoother. Your confidence grows quietly. Your English begins to feel comfortable instead of forced. Try to use a few of these sentences in your daily conversations. Say them out loud. Listen to how they sound. Feel how they flow. Then adapt them to your own voice and your own situations. You do not need to rush. You do not need to memorize everything. Consistent practice, even just a few minutes each day, creates real progress. This is how calm, confident English develops. Step by step. Naturally. With intention. And this is the journey we continue together inside Fluent English Journey.